Why do you have bullets in your chest? You still have a while to go here. You'll tell me eventually. What do you know? We got a letter for you this morning. There's a photograph inside. Come, take a look. Don't you ever take me for a dummy. Teach you a lesson. Well, I want to see for myself how tough the man who killed Samuel really is. Ha! 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 Ha!
Hey, Adrenalheads and Panelers, I'm Frank.
And I'm Mark.
Today we're going to be covering Riki Oh, the story of Riki. This is from 1991. This will be a cross-promoted podcast with Panels to Pixels podcast and Adrenaline Cinema podcast. The movie was based after a manga comic.
Yep, Manga actually put this out back in like 88, 89. And then they finally decided to do a movie adaptation. And it's lived in its own little legacy, everybody. So we've had this up for a while. Nobody really posted anything. Some people said, "Oh, I like it" or whatever on the Facebook post and Instagram, but they didn't really reply or respond. But we figured, let's get it out there. Let's get your thoughts. And if you have not watched the movie or even read the manga comic, you don't even have to read the manga comic. You can easily just find it online through Tubi or whatnot, and it's out there streaming. It's 91, so obviously old effects and everything else. But check it out. This movie was directed by Lam Ngai Kai or Ngai Kai.
It is written by Tetsuya Sadawata, and he's the creator based on the manga illustrated by Masahiko Takaho. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names.
Yeah, we all do the same thing whenever we do this. Sorry, everybody.
And also by Nagai Choi Lam.
Yeah, and it was produced by Chan Tung Chao.
Tagline for this movie is the greatest Hong Kong martial arts action revenge-soaked prison breakout love story cult film of 1991.
Yeah, and this was based off the DVD, everybody. Not, I thought it was hilarious when I found out that tagline. Apparently, they didn't have one for the movie when it came out. So with that, this always comes with like IMDb scores, Rotten Tomatoes. So the IMDb score still stands at a strong 7.1 out of 10. So it has a legacy, everybody. So if you have not seen it, go watch it, come back, listen to us. Those of you who have watched it and want to listen and laugh, because we're going to talk about some stuff in the movie that we love or that we like, that we find funny or interesting. But Rotten Tomatoes score is 89%. And that's usually regular reviewers.
Right.
And the Tomatometer, which is the audience score, is at 85%. So this lives in like Sam Raimi cult following kind of filmmaking, but and this is Hong Kong, so it's China. So right. So it's still within the Asian martial arts. This actually displays the manga kind of side of it, where it's its own Chinese style comic adapted, and it has its own roots in fantasy and fiction and science fiction and comic lore. But I think it's so hilarious to talk about. Now, I'm going to let you say this, Frank. What did it? You have the overall calculation of what it made. What is this here?
At the time it was released, it made $2,147,778 in Hong Kong dollars.
Okay. Since
So
then,
I'm sure it's made more than that.
Oh yeah, since then it definitely has made something else through DVD, Blu-ray, streaming content. Right. Who knows if the actors have gone on to conventions and signed their lives away on autographs and whatnot, because it is still a legacy style movie, and everybody just loves it. The synopsis for this particular film, just to give you an idea, if you haven't, Riki Oh, a young man who has superhuman strength, is incarcerated in a private prison where inmates are treated like slaves. He is forced to use his unstoppable form of martial arts to destroy the corrupt officials and their lackeys. Which actually is what the movie is all about, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't go into his backstory, but we do get his backstory at some point in the movie, and we'll go over that later on. But that out of the way, we're going to move into people we may know of or we don't know, obviously, because some of these people I am not familiar with myself. So you start us off.
So our first actor is playing Riki Oh, which in the movie is actually referred to as Riki Ho.
Yes.
The last name Saiga, which they don't ever even mention that. But his full name is Su Wong Lewis Fan.
Interesting. So that's the actor's name is Su Wong Lewis Fan.
It's Su Wong, and like Lewis is his other first name, like his English first name. He acts under Lewis Fan.
Awesome. So you know that he could actually speak English, and he probably has acted in English. I'm surprised that
Hong Kong at that time was still kind of owned by was still part of Britain, so they were required to. A lot of times they were required to learn English.
Yes. Next up, Cyclops Dan, who's in the film, the character Fan Mei Sheng, aka Fan Mui Sang, aka Dad to Lewis Fan.
That's his dad.
That's his dad. Wow. Awesome.
I always thought that was cool just because of the fact that I could only imagine, like, you're shooting these scenes with this person that you're supposed to be, he's your antagonist, and it had to be funny as hell, especially if you've seen the movie. You know just how off the wall the warden, or I should say the assistant warden, because that's who he is, is.
Yeah, and we'll go into more detail about him when we get into our discussion, because it's hilarious.
So also playing the warden is Ka Hui Ko.
Yep.
That's all I have for that.
Yeah, and it's so funny too, because some people get it mixed up between the assistant warden and the warden.
Right.
I noticed. I've had these conversations with other people who've seen the film, and they're like, no, that was the warden. No, the real warden shows up at the end with his goofy little son in the pajamas.
Oh my God, that kid needs a slap. Oh my God. Yeah. All right.
He's not really a kid. Anyhow.
I mean, yeah, exactly right. He's like this 25-year-old dude who's like acting like a kid, which I'll give it up to him. He does play the part well, because he literally does make you want to slap the shit out of him. But
all right, next up will be Rogan / the West Cell leader, played by Yukari Ashima.
And then we have Oscar, who was our North Cell leader, by Frankie Chi Lung.
Yep. Frankie Chi Lung Chan, right? Yeah.
Yes, Chan. Yeah.
Okay. And next up will be Tarzan, who's the East Cell leader, Koichi Sugasaki.
Yeah. And then finally, we have our South Cell leader, which his name is Brandon. But he's played by Kwai Hong Wong.
Huh. Interesting. So obviously, those of you who are into Kung Fu from China during that time in the late 80s, or I would say mid 80s, all the way into probably the 90s, would know these people because they'd been around for a long time.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if they worked in the same like aspects of Jackie Chan and Chow Yun Fat and things like that. That was very much known around that time, and they had their own genre at that point. A lot of those movies you would have to go look for at the Palmer Video, Blockbuster, Hollywood. What was it? Hollywood Video.
I think it was Hollywood Video. Yeah,
that turned into eventually. But all the national chains would have their own kung fu section. And eventually that's what kind of led into where the Wachowskis did the Matrix and got everything that they wanted to create the Matrix at one point. And because everybody got like on to saying a kung fu fighting. But with that, we're going to go into the movie itself a little bit. And we're just going to give our general thoughts of the movie, where we saw it first, how we came into knowing it, what we love about it, what we like about it. And then we'll go into our favorite scenes. So, Frank, start us off.
All right. So my first time becoming aware of this movie, I actually had a book that was about gory movies. And it was just covering like different horror movies, different things like that. And I was really into that. I was avid Fangoria reader and things like that. And there was a shot from this movie in this book. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, this looks so crazy. I have to see this movie. So I literally like searched it out and I found it on DVD. And I actually have here my DVD of Riki Oh, where you can see Riki. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, nobody's going to see it, but I can, and I know it.
Exactly right. Riki Ho, or Riki Oh, as they keep calling it. And this is one of the best movies to watch if you've got a bunch of people to do a watch party, lots of beer. I mean, bottom line is it knows what it is and wants us to basically take your disbelief and leave it at the door.
Yeah.
And you're okay with that because by the end of this movie, like I said, you see it's got an 85% tomato meter reading from the fans. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's a solid movie. Granted, it's batshit crazy, but it's still a solid movie. It's one of those ones that
every scene, if you think about it, every scene
really isn't.
Yeah, it's chopped together, and it's like every scene is a panel, and I hate saying it.
It's a bunch of fantastical events.
It's a bunch of fantastic events from like 2 pages out of a comic of various panels thrown together to make one complete story. So whoever wrote the script said, all right, I'm taking this graphic novel. I'm going to take the best of it. And literally it's all based within prison. So it's a cheaper budget to do. And the funniest is because the way it's plotted out is that it's 2001 AD. So it's in the future.
Right. It's 2001 AD and it goes into the prisons being privatized, which if you're anybody who pays any attention to any recent events, you know that that's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
A lot of prisons are being privatized.
24 years later from the time that this movie was based off of the year, but there you go. Yeah, and I agree with you. It was me pretty much the same thing. I remembered this from visuals from the Headbangers Ball back in 91, 92, and they would, during intermission breaks on the Headbangers Ball on MTV, they would have clips of, like, obviously my love of Godzilla and kaiju films. They would have like the Ghidorah lightning strikes and you see the heads, but you was also see bodies exploding, which was from this. So you could see heads being smashed off. The assistant warden blowing up, which I do remember. And I think that's the Fangoria you're talking about, because they had an image in it of that shot. And I think I had that issue of the magazine, and I remember saying, I gotta see this movie in some way. And obviously it did come out on, rental for, like we were talking before we got here. It was that Palmer Video, West or Hollywood Video or Blockbuster at certain points in the mid 90s when they became very much popular, and then they had that whole kung fu section there, and that's where you would go and
Right.
it would be there. And it was probably one of the movies that was always probably taken out because people like us would be like, hey dude, let's go and watch this, and let's get a bunch of guys, we'll hang
Right.
out, get some pizza, get some beer, and just talk over and just like, oh, check out that, oh look, it's like, oh, he just put his face through his throat and came out his mouth. How the hell did he do that? Stuff like that. And that's where it lives in infamy. I remember renting it I think I rented it. I had it for 3 days. I played a show at my band, and it was a cover band at the time in the mid 90s. So I brought it with me just after the show. We got home, back to my drummer's house and the guitar player's house at like 2 a.m. We threw it on.
Right.
So we have AJ Perro there from Twisted Sister, a friend of ours who's my buddy Jamie's cousin, or cousin by marriage. And he goes, I remember this movie. I was like, we got to watch this. I was like, okay, cool. Let's watch it. So we all just got drunk or whatever. They were all getting probably high. But it was one of those things a bunch of guys could hang out and just watch and drink and do whatever and party with. And you just like, it's just relentless violence in it. Now, mind you, there are lull times because of the story arc, but also there's some like gimmicky things that are so that make you go, what? And you go, okay. And those are probably within our favorite scenes within the movie itself. Like one of those things that made me go, what? And I'll go into one of my favorite scenes is when Ricky's brought in and the assistant warden's there, and he has to talk to him, like induct him into the prison and whatnot. And he's dealing with the eye thing. He's got a fake eye, but inside that eye, he's got mints.
Yeah.
He shakes out mints. I was like, you need a mint. And then the best is what's behind him. Did you notice?
Yeah. It's a wall full of porn.
Exactly. It's a wall full of freaking Asian porn.
It's all DVD porn on the back wall.
Not DVD, it was VHS. So it was like all Chinese porn, which is so hilarious. So I loved it. Yeah. And then that was one of the first things I noticed whenever I watch it again. I was like, oh my God, the porn. Oh my God, he's got a hook for a hand. It's like he looks like the claw from Inspector Gadget with the claw on his hand. So you know right away, you're like, this ain't real.
No, yeah, exactly.
Anything else that you have, like a specific scene?
Well, it's really hard, okay, because if you start watching a film, like it subtly ramps up if you're watching it. It starts off with like, hey, you're being brought into the prison, you've got 5 bullets in your chest, and they just happen to have an X-ray machine there. Okay. I mean, normally they just do a strip search and worry about it that way, but these guys just specifically have an X-ray machine that is open. So that means that any X-ray they're taking, everybody in that room is getting radiation. But hey, whatever, right?
Apparently,
again,
it's not a problem in the future.
Disbelief. Yeah, take that disbelief and leave it at the door.
Exactly.
But every time you think that you found like the most outrageous thing that it could possibly be, it amps up again.
Yes.
And just to warn some people who are really like sensitive to it, there is one part where there's a little cruelty to animals.
Yes.
Granted, of course.
Yeah.
It's not real, but it looks very real.
It looks very real. Yeah, I do agree. One like leading up after that, it's like the first confrontation Ricky has to deal with. And actually they bring out a garden tool that is Asian that we use now.
Yeah.
This day and age. It looks like it's ready to cut limbs. It's dual-sided serrated. It's on a long stick. Oscar has it and he's ready to go after Ricky with it. And next thing you know, it goes into Oscar's face.
Well, it's It's actually Philip Kwok. It was Philip Kwok, who we know, if you're into martial arts movies, you might know him a little bit better as the lizard from the Five Deadly Venoms.
Ah, yes.
And he was also in Hard Boiled with Chow Yun-fat. He's actually the main villain in that movie is Philip Kwok, which I love him. He's great. But he gets it because that's when the one of the henchmen, he like goes to take a poop and he comes out and they basically surround him and they're talking about how he got old Ma killed, which is another prisoner.
Yes.
And then they go ahead and they're threatening him with it. But then Oscar shows up and Oscar went and he smacks him right in the face with that saw.
Oh, that's what it was. That's where I got it wrong. Yeah.
They show you the blood just streaming out of the and then they take him, but the assistant warden shows up and they takes him by his mouth with the hook. His mouth. And hooks his mouth and drags him along. And I am like, dude, there is no way that you cannot hurt yourself doing that scene, because he's really got to drag you, and you can't. If you look at the way he's moving, he's moving his legs to try to help it along, but a lot of the pulling is just being on like his jaw. You know, it's like, what the hell, dude?
And it's not the only time that happens.
No, it happens twice. Right, it does. It happens twice. But if I had to pick like one scene to say like, all right, this is probably my favorite of the coolest scene. There's a part where Rogan, who is the cell leader, who is played by a woman, actually, she takes a knife and goes across a guy's face, and his whole bottom of his face just comes right off.
Goes down. It's just like...
it just...
peels the skin and the nose and everything, and it goes down. And all you see is the face real quick, and you're like, it's something out of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of fatalities, especially in the newer versions, that have been, borrowing from stuff like that.
Especially like one where Ricky winds up punching, I forget who it was, but right in the head, and literally the head explodes and the brain pops out a little bit.
Yeah,
I forgot about that one.
There's that one. That's the gang leader who gives him the 5 bullets. Actually, he actually leaves a fist mark in his head.
Yep.
Which is why he's in jail. So.
And then there's the fight in the courtyard too. Was it Oscar at that point? I think with the intestines.
Where yes, that's Oscar.
Okay.
So
and the fact that Ricky could easily sew up his arm after a certain bit too in the middle of a battle, and then next thing you know,
I love it because in that scene, first of all, the warden, the assistant warden, gives him, "I'm going to lend you the knife for this," and like you're like, you got one specific knife for use for these things? Okay, right, fine.
Yeah, one specific knife that looks like the Rambo knife used to get as a kid in the early 80s. Everybody. and
he goes and he, first things first, like I can see now why he gave him the knife, because he takes the knife out and then he throws the handle, or he takes the sheath and he flings it towards Ricky's face, and glass comes out of the knife handle and gets into Ricky's eyes.
Yes.
Who then proceeds to break a sewer line and use that to clean out his eye. I'd be like, look, the glass in your eye.
Was it glass or was it sand? I thought it was sand or something.
He says it's glass, and if you in the dub, it could have been sand, but
it
I
looked
feel
like sand to me.
I feel like it's probably glass because it actually was like cutting him or something.
Which kind of takes away from, like, let's say Enter the Dragon, when Bruce Lee is blinded, he's like, ah, or even Bloodsport, where you see Rob Van Dam go, ah. But he takes the line to wash his eyes out.
He washes his eyes out with it, and I'm like, dude, the glass is the least of your problems with all the things that you just put in your eye. That's really serious pink eye. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, especially you got all that boo in there. And then
Oh,
Oscar winds up trying to like choke him.
right.
But before all this happens, at that point, Oscar says, "Ricky, you are all right. We will die together." And he takes the
Yeah.
wound and pulls his intestines out to try to choke him with it.
This is after he's gone ahead and cut Ricky in his arm to the point where his tendons are showing. So he just takes and ties them, puts it like he's tying a bow.
Yeah,
He ties it with his
tendon.
teeth, and he ties the tendon together. He's like, works fine.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was always humor. So with the smashing of heads or body parts, like fists, arms, or whatever, just exploding in this movie. And on top of that, as well as the flying out of nowhere by certain beyond means of like them being able to jump very high and fly up and out of nowhere, like Rogan had done a few times. It just reminded me of like out of Big Trouble in Little China with the Three Storms.
Yeah. So
yeah, good.
Going into like we're getting into a little bit there as far as the interesting moments, but for you, like what your top three?
Oh, the top three would be one would be the end battle scene, which we'll go in depth about, which I thought was pretty cool because it was something out of a mutation that we get from the warden. He mutates and it's like, oh, he sends his son out, all the guards. And he goes, my kung fu is better than you. And you realize it's like, okay, he's superpowered too, because we all know that Ricky's superpowered. So they have that. That would be my number one, is the ultimate battle between, because it's the big boss kill at that point. And it was pretty cool. Secondly would be the cell scene where Ricky's trying to be crushed. They try to crush him.
Right. After they've put him in cement, you know what I mean? And basically tried to kill him like in a million different ways, but they get him finally with, he takes out a stun gun of all things, the warden does, and shocks the
bars.
But this is after Ricky has gone ahead and the character Tarzan, he's literally put his fist through his jaw. He's broken his leg, broken his arm. Like he literally makes his elbow explode, then his fist explode. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I know. To me, it's it was the main battle scene. It's out of sequence, everybody. So if you haven't watched the movie, go watch it and you'll laugh because you'll be like, I gotta watch that scene. So the final battle scene, which is awesome. I figure that's my number one. My number two would be the cell. Before that would be probably like the usual fisticuffs that it kind of meshes within the buildup of the movie itself,
right?
Of how everything is. I just find it interesting. It's hard to pick a third one, but all of them kind of blend together because they're all very similar. You still get the body parts exploding, especially like when like moments like when Ricky is able to blast through a metal door.
Right.
And that to me is like hilarious. He's got that much strength that he could go through, but he can't break the chains that are holding him back inside when he's in the cell.
Exactly. Right.
And he's got to eat the rice from the dish on the floor. But and steel bars, he could break through those with no harm because he does that with the cell at the end, towards the end when he has to go after everybody. And it's just like, okay, well, where's that power before?
So for me,
like
if I had to pick three, like the first one is like the first two things that happen in the movie. When they actually are like, they go into a bathroom and the head of the North Cell, who I guess the underboss of the North Cell, because he's not Oscar. But he's basically going to the bathroom and he pushes this guy out of the way. Old Ma, that's actually who it was, because Old Ma made parole and he's mad because he made parole, blah, blah, blah. But he tosses him aside and he actually breaks like this toy train that Ma was making for his kid because he's getting ready to get out. He's taking this thing to his kid. So he comes after him because he broke the toy with a planer, but like a Japanese style planer, which if anybody knows planers, they know there's like a razor blade underneath that you can plane out wood. But they take that away from him and use it on his face. And you see like a perfect like line of like just slashed from his face to his, like the top of his head. Yeah. It's just like this 2-inch long, perfect like swath of flesh that's just taken out. And it's so outrageous. You're like, it's the first, like one of the first things that happens where you're sitting there and you're going, holy crap, what the heck is this movie?
Exactly.
And like it's and then the next thing is like they've done that. They basically are walking away, and Ricky, you don't actually see, you just see the leg, and you just have to assume that it's Ricky.
Yeah.
Trips him, and there's just this random piece of wood, this 1x6 piece of wood with a bunch of nails in it that he lands on with his hand and his eye. Like this, and it's really bad as far as the dummy that they use.
Yeah,
but it's so freaking awesome to be like, wow. And that's like, hey, if you're just gonna leave like wooden, tools and projects lying around, you're gonna have a bad time. You're gonna have a bad time.
Somebody's gonna utilize that as a weapon.
Exactly, it's prison, guys. If you've ever seen Penitentiary,
Yeah.
Leon Isaac's Kennedy.
Well, yeah, the movie Prison back in the mid 80s. That Kane Hodder actually did the effects for.
The other thing is that we were talking a little bit earlier about where the assistant warden keeps his mints. You always want to wonder where people are if they're offering you a mint, where do they keep them? Because it might be in your eye or his fake eye. There's that one.
Yeah, that was like one of those going, what?
Yeah. And
it had to be a comic book if that were the case. It had
exactly
to be
right.
something.
It had to be a manga, and that's not even like maybe the worst thing that you've ever seen in a manga, but it's just like it's so. I can only imagine people at the time seeing this movie for the first time and just being like, "What the hell, dude?
What am I watching?"
It's literally exactly right. Every time you turn around, it's another what the hell moment.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the other things that we've already talked about, but also like this the person who gets his face chopped off. There's that, and just the off the wall, outlandish stuff that is going on throughout the entire movie. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Like some of the outlandish things that they do is they kind of like dig a big hole in the middle of the prison grounds, and then they have Ricky there, he's chained there, and they're gonna bury him, and they leave him a breathing tube.
Right.
And the assistant warden goes, "You're gonna be here for 7 days buried, and here's your breathing tube." And and everybody's like in the prison, all his friends are like, "Oh my god, I hope he can live. Is he gonna survive? What the hell? What's going on?" And in the middle of the night, this is where a scene that Frank had mentioned earlier, where was it Rogan and somebody else? I forget who.
Yeah, Rogan and Brandon.
Yeah, Rogan and Brandon show up, and they pop out, and they do that one of those jumping out of nowhere. Yeah. Into the sky, going, "Oh, okay, all right," and then they're like, "Try to breathe through those. Gonna need a plumber." They drop something in the tube.
Unfortunately, of the scene where they do nasty things to a pet,
they kick the dog and it splits in half.
They give him a piece of the dog and say, "Hey, have that."
Yep. Have fun with the plumbing.
And then Ricky eats it.
He does eat it. Yes, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Hey, well,
you know what's really funny about that? Is that when they get him out of the hole, the guy who comes with a backhoe and basically takes him out of the hole without, first of all, killing him.
Yeah.
Second of all, by the chains so that he's just hanging from the backhoe by the chains.
Yeah.
Dude, that's talent.
Yeah, talent. It's like the claw machine going in blind looking
Yeah.
for something that's sensitive, like your hamster chained up in there, and you don't accidentally puncture it.
Oh my goodness.
Not to be too gruesome and give you a visual of it, but that's what my
Hey,
thought
look,
was.
if you're on this podcast, and if you're aware of this movie, you already know the craziness of it.
Exactly. You already know what's involved, and you're either laughing or agreeing with us, or some of you who are a little bit they're like, oh my god, you guys are so gross and gruesome. Ugh. And you're just like, I want to hear what they have to say next. Kind of like a Howard Stern show or something.
You
back in the
literally
day.
have to watch this movie at least once. If you watch it once and you don't like it and you never like it again,
But you'll remember
cool.
certain things.
But exactly. You'll be like, you know what? When someone brings up this movie, you'll be able to sit there and go, yeah, I saw it once.
Yep. And that was all I needed. One of which that I did like is because of that scene with the burying scene, we did get Ricky's backstory a little bit. We already knew about the girlfriend. He was already intimidated by the assistant warden with the girlfriend's picture and crushing it and saying he'll destroy him in other ways, but we didn't know how he got in there. But we get the backstory of the girlfriend that he went to school with, and apparently she was leaving whatever it was from the university, because you could tell with the halogen lights and they're coming out of the building. She sees the heroin addicts that are out there, and then she gets grabbed by these people. She kind of was able to get away, but in the process of getting away, unfortunately, by being chased by these guys, she
runs off a roof,
off the building. It's like, oh my god! And you know it's a dummy, but it's what? And then she did,
and you're like, oh crap!
And then he just goes out on a point of revenge to go after the people that literally led to his girlfriend dying, and hence why he has the bullets, because he gets shot 5 times in the chest.
Right.
And then that's his flashback while he's stuck under the ground for 7 days. So you're like, oh, full story, come around. We got, even though it's kind of like out of the blue, you're like, okay, we got the backstory. Okay. But it just keeps proceeding more, where you see him getting out. There's the fight, the gimmicks of the warden at a certain point, where with the food showing his son, he goes, oh, you guys aren't fed properly. Oh, look, and the son's trying to eat some of this stuff. He separates it, grabs the son, and the son's crying, little tantrum. And then one of the other guys was prepping something, and the warden just comes up from behind him, and he's like, oh, you guys keep complaining about your food. And then he shoves his arm into the grinder, and he gets the meat from the freaking arm. He goes, here you go, here's your meat,
here you go, eat this.
Eat this. And it shows you how gruesome this is. And then it erupts into the final battle with Ricky coming in, because he just breaks through a wall. And we get the warden at full Mortal Kombat killing machine, or maybe even Street Fighter. I don't know what you would call it. He just grows into something.
He hulks out basically, and the really messed up part of that is that there's so much snot. There's so much snot coming out of his nose and stuff like that, man. Yeah, granted, he's this big, ugly giant, which that was enough for me. But to have all of this coming down from your face, and like, oh, come on, man.
Oh man. So yeah, that pretty much how it pretty much ends, because he winds up destroying the warden.
Yeah.
At that point, he breaks the walls down, and everybody is free at that point to leave kind of prison.
A karma moment, because he actually gets the warden into the industrial meat grinder.
Yes,
that he just used to get
that it just keeps grinding down. You see the warden going, and it's legs down. It's all
his head is left.
Yeah. And he's got that weird look with the big lips and the big
It's really,
the head is kind of like almost in like this. It's kind of molded into like a pin top almost. Yeah.
It's like a Japanese demon type of. That's the design that they were basically going for.
Yeah.
If you see like old Japanese paintings of demons, you'll see that type of aesthetic where
Usually, and they have a mustache too.
right.
Twirl. Yeah. It's Chinese and in Japanese. It's all part of within that Asian area of and that locale, because they have similar drawings, but with dragons and things of that nature too. So it's part of the folklore. But yeah, we find, he basically, Riki winds up saving them, which is so funny, but it's so cool. But it pretty much ends the story there at that point, if you think about it. And that's how it ends. And it's just like that. All right, well, we're not getting a sequel. But it was fun to watch for some of us who probably watched it once going, oh my God, that was a terrible movie. Why do you like this? And then it becomes a point of discussion for people going, why? Oh, we just like this stuff.
Yeah,
but
exactly. Why not?
Well, with that, we could move, since we discussed and brought up a lot of a bulk of the movie, our favorite moments, our 3 favorite moments within it. We could get into the interesting facts or unknown facts about the movie. And these are stuff that I pulled off of Google, everybody. You could Google this stuff and it'll come up. But they give a first subject, which is source material and character background. So, Frank, you want to read us off on that one first?
The film is based on a Japanese manga series called Riki Oh by Hiroki Samura, which is known for its graphic violence and detailed fight choreography.
Okay. Wolf nickname. So Riki Oh's nickname, Wolf, reflects his reputation as a violent loner, but the manga delves deeper into his complex motivations, showing his desire for justice and a tragic past that led to his aggressive demeanor.
Then 5 bullet wounds. The iconic 5 bullet wounds on Riki Oh's chest are a key visual element symbolizing a traumatic event from his past that fuels his fighting spirit. Now, obviously, in the manga, he's probably kind of like Fist of the North Star, where he's got the actual marks. But in the movie, you don't see that, which explains the reason why they do in the beginning. They show with the X-ray that he's got 5 bullets in his chest.
Okay. That makes sense. Next subject line would be film production and impact, and its controversial release. So, due to its extreme violence, Riki Oh, or Riki Ho, was heavily censored in some regions and faced criticism for its graphic depictions of brutality.
Yeah. Graphic, yeah.
Yeah.
Fight choreography. The film's fight scenes are renowned for their creative and brutal choreography, with a focus on exaggerated body movements and over-the-top special effects.
Yep, that it does. Impact on Hong Kong cinema. So, while considered a cult classic, Riki Oh is seen as part of the trend of increasingly violent Hong Kong action films in the late 80s and early 90s. And that it is. It was... It literally led it in the 90s, I would say, because it's 91.
It was one of I think it was the first film that got like their classification 3, which is kind of like an X rating in our version.
Yeah.
Of the MPAA.
Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Going into lesser known facts. The symbolism of the hexagram. There's a scar on Riki Oh's right hand which resembles a hexagram, which can be interpreted as a symbol of his connection to a mystical or spiritual force. Now, in the movie, you don't really see this.
No.
Yeah.
No. It was probably something that was manga based that they threw in there, but filming wise, you don't really see it.
I would have liked it if they had, though, like the during the training or the sort of training montage
That is
that
true.
happens with his uncle.
Uncle,
they could have had that. Whereas they did put in this part where he glows, and I'm like, when did this become The Last Dragon? Like, what is that?
Yeah, that is true. Next up, brotherly connection. So in the manga, Riki Oh has a younger brother named Nachi, who plays a significant role in his backstory and motivations. So, yeah, that was something that was omitted. But talking about the hexagram, though, before, I have something that we'll throw in at the very tail end that I like to add in from something that was ripped off of Riki Oh. Next one, Frank.
Despite cultural inference. Despite its violent nature, Riki Oh has gained a cult following and is often referenced in popular culture, particularly in martial arts and video game communities. For sure.
Yeah, it does. We kind of mentioned it, the reminders of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and everything based around Kung Fu gaming, if you think about it. So, especially with the extremism of Mortal Kombat.
Right, like I said, if you watch this movie and then watch like a compilation of Mortal Kombat finishing moves from the more recent years, you'll see different things in there that you'll be like, oh, they got that out of Riki.
Yeah, they did. You have something in here that you added. You want to read that?
Yes, I added this just because I thought it was really interesting. So I've said previously that Rogan, who is the leader, who is actually played by a woman. Mm-hmm. It's a male character, but it's a woman playing him, and her name is Yukari Oshima. And during a scene with Louis Fan and Yukari Oshima, it's when they're in the poppy fields and there's the fire burning behind them. It's a huge fire because there's like a good row of like 50 plants on fire there. Mm-hmm. So they're dousing Louis Fan with water to make sure that he's protected. But he noticed that Oshima's neck was literally smoking and blistering while he was trying to do the scene. And he didn't say anything at the time, but after the scene ended, he asked her, he's like, "Are you okay? Why didn't you like say something, that you're burning?" And she's like, "Well, you weren't finished with your lines, so I couldn't wait to I couldn't wait to ask for the cut until you finished your lines."
Wow.
He was so impressed by that. After that, he just basically referred to her in interviews as amazing Yukari.
Wow. That is dedication.
Exactly. Yeah, that's you're physically being injured and you're like, let's just shoot this scene.
Just get this scene over with.
That's when you go, use it.
Put it in the film. If you cut that, I'm going to kill you.
All right. And then one last thing that I added also. There was so much blood used in the meat grinder scene in the finale that Louis Fan could not wash the red off his skin for 3 days.
He can't get the dye.
That's
was so
crazy. and hopefully it wasn't red dye. Red dye number, 36 or something like that?
It's just so hard to get rid of. You have to get layers of skin off before you get rid of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my little add-on to this is something that because this had influenced something of, and we said video games and things of that nature.
Right.
There was a movie that came out in 2006 that I recall coming out, and I got to meet the director. I met somebody who I knew that was in the film itself, and the movie was called Shadow Dead Riot, and it starred. And this was like a direct to video movie back in the day and it was starring Tony Todd, who we all know as Candyman, who's also in the Final Destinations. Sadly, Tony has passed away recently,
unfortunately,
and rest his soul. He's actually in the next Final Destination movie, which is his very last movie appearance, everybody. So keep that in mind. So that's his last appearance. He did a video game or did voiceover recently on video game and an animated show. But Final Destination, the next one that's coming out, is going to be the last time we'll ever see or hear from. Also, somebody who I know, and I mentioned it, her name is Erin Brown, but all those who stay up late at night back in the 90s know her as Misty Monday. And she was part of that whole, all those movies, like if you remember, Lord of the G-Strings, Spider Babe, Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde, things of that nature. They did a whole bunch of them. They're considered softcore porn. They don't do full penetration, things of that nature. So this is stuff that you saw on Showtime or Cinemax or on HBO after hours. It also starred Carla Green and Nita Hoderick. And the movie was a rip from pretty much of Riki Oh, the story of Riki, because it's literally based in a woman's prison, and a woman is brought in and she is superpowered. And literally you get the same fighting styles, same situation, but the fact that it's a women's prison and it's meant to be, okay, this is kind of, exploitation in its purest form, but also inclusive to what horror and exploitive, like grindhouse stuff back in the day with nudity and things of that nature. They just went overboard with it. It's an interesting story for the fact that they include voodoo in it, because Tony Todd's character is a prisoner that is related to the main one that comes in. Spoilers, but if I'm spoiling it for you, you're gonna go watch it for either the boobies or the glorified violence and gore.
Yeah.
But it's a movie that you should at least see once, as well as Riki Oh. And I thought it was interesting because I'm like, Erin had told me about this, and I rented it because it was out for 6 months before they released it for purchase at conventions or in back in the time when you actually had a video store to buy movies from, like a Best Buy or what did they have? What was that called? I forget.
Oh my goodness, there were so many video stores.
Pacific Coast,
Hollywood Video,
RKO, or whatever it is. Where they sold DVDs exclusive, or you would have to special order it or something. It was before online blew up like with Amazon. So I got to see them at the convention. I saw Tony. Tony had a little bit to drink, and this is like a memory I have of it, but he was just not happy that the representation of the film was more in another area of the convention. But Aaron was there with the director, and I asked him, he goes, "Oh, you saw it already?" I'm like, "Yeah, I rented it." He goes, "What'd you think?" Reminded me a lot of Riki Oh. He goes, "Yeah, kind of, right?" And I was like, "Okay, it is a ripoff. I did not know." I didn't say that to him, but in my head, I'm like, "Yay!" And I just looked at her. I said, "Well," and this was another step for her because she got into more like a couple of more mainstream style films that were on, even though they were direct to like Showtime or HBO. She got her name out there, and the best is that I was like, it's like it literally confirmed to me, but I had to recommend it and suggest that as something to watch here for you guys, because this is something that you gotta watch. It's got zombies in it, it's got the excessive blood, the extreme violence, just like Riki Oh, but it's all women, and you see a jacked up woman fighting up this other chick who looks like something out of like a UFC, and they're getting into it. And obviously for those guys who just like to be like misogynistic and say, "Hey, it's got boobies." Yeah, it does. But I like it for the horror and the violence aspect of it more so than anything, because plus it's got Tony in it. It's got Tony Todd in it. So I highly recommend that you get it. There's some of the blood in it is actually green at times too, by the way. So that's where you get away with it.
Nice.
So with the ratings and stuff, but have fun with it. Check it out. You should be able to find that on like Tubi, Pluto TV, I think Roku channel has it at certain points for like if you could like look for it. Just look for it online. If not, you could probably find a copy at a local horror convention, sci-fi convention on Blu-ray or bootleg or DVD, depending. I'm sure they still have them out there. But
all of those services are great if you're a B movie fan, like Tubi
correct.
and
That's where we all go to get our stuff, and that's where I went to find my movies at times when, like, oh, I wanted to get Sorority Babes in a Slimeball-Ballorama.
Yeah,
and that was out. They released that on Blu-ray, but you couldn't find it anywhere. You couldn't find it even on Amazon. So I went directly to the booth or the table at the convention from the company that produced it, and they sold it to you. And guess what? You didn't get charged tax. You paid like whatever it was, $15. Boom. Straight Blu-ray, and you got the special features in there too. So if you're into like finding stuff like that, go to the convention, support your I like to saying it, support the celebrities, but sometimes they're not really celebrities, but support your film people out there, or TV and film, because a lot of the ones that I do go to are nostalgic based, and they have this stuff there. But anyhow, that's all I had to add and to give for additional notes or unknown facts. But the only thing that we have left on the film itself that I didn't get to, or we didn't get to, was quotes. So I don't know if you had any more quotes, Frank.
Man, this is like picking a good quote for this movie is like picking one scene. It's really hard to do.
It is.
But my favorite, for sure, is when Oscar is actually trying to strangle Ricky with his intestines that he's just pulled out of his body. It wasn't like they were already hanging out. He literally reaches into his body, pulls out his intestines, and goes to try and strangle him with it. And then the assistant warden goes, "All right, Oscar, you've got a lot of guts." And I love that so much.
That's like a mic drop right there.
Exactly right. It's like, whoa. And that again gives you an idea of what you're getting yourself into if you try to watch this movie. People almost getting strangled with another person's guts. There you go.
I think one that I didn't really say, I said everything else incorporated within the scenes that we discussed. The only one I didn't really mention is one in Ricky in the cell screaming where human beings were human beings.
Yeah.
As the ceiling descends, which is kind of goofy, but that's one of them. But the only other one that was like, I thought was pretty humorous was Brandon saying in the very beginning when Oscar shows up, he goes, "When Oscar shows his tattoo, he must kill. You should know that, Ricky." I'm like, okay, he just got to prison, so actually now he knows. Not to be Captain Obvious.
Crazy.
It's crazy, but that's how the movie is. So, like it, don't like it, let us know, and we'll get to you. We'll let you know how to get to us when it comes to that. Right now we're at the point in the podcast, well, where could people hear you? So Frank.
So you can find me on the Filmtropolis podcast, which was formerly Fantasy Picks. I always do that. Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. Mm-hmm. Or I'm also sometimes here on Adrenaline Cinema. Mm-hmm. Did I do Panels Pixels? I don't think I did.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah,
I think, okay. Oh, yes. You know what? I think we did Escape from New York.
We did Escape from New York for Adrenaline, and I think, were you on for Deadpool Wolverine?
Yes.
So that was on Panels to Pixels. So okay. Yeah, he could be found here as well, everybody. So you've heard him here before. And hopefully he could come on for the music one if he's interested in music. So, but the music podcast, the Power Chord Music Podcast. But as always, you guys know where you can find me here as well. Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, as always, as well as Panels to Pixels Podcast, to keep you in a loop of what's going on after this particular episode, because we already did Nosferatu. We did this. I already have Lethal Weapon 2 lined up with our friend Steve Brown. So we're going to cover Lethal Weapon 2. We haven't gone back to the old school stuff of Adrenaline Cinema podcast. So I want to go back to that a little bit. Steve had brought it up. He goes, let's get back to it. It's like, okay, let's get back to it. So we're going to do that. We're going to continue our coverage with that stuff. And then with Panels to Pixels podcast, we just finished up our coverage of What If Season 3. We're going to be moving into an overall discussion of the Crisis on Infinite Earths miniseries that was on Max, that you could find on Max, actually. It's through Warner Brothers, goodness. As well as Creature Commandos. So probably give you two separate episodes regarding that, depending on who wants to come on. And then after that, we're going to do Daredevil Born Again. We're going to do that episodically, everybody, too. So we'll be doing them once a week every time the episode comes out. So keep in mind, and then we'll leave you feedback, which is where I give you the information for this. We did leave a post for you to send some feedback, as always, but nobody really did put anything in. They put in some likes. They liked the images. They go, oh, that's a great movie, but they didn't really say anything about it. But you could always go to our Facebook page, which would be facebook.com/Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, which is solely where this what we're recording this one for, or facebook.com/Panels to Pixels. And that's it. That's all you have to do is just go on there, follow us, and then if you see the image, put it in the image below. What's on Facebook is on Instagram, as always. And if you feel the need that you don't want to leave those in any Instagram Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or the comment sections, you could just email us, and that could be done by sending us a regular email at adrenalincinemapodcast@gmail.com. Very much straight there. All you have to do is that, and then write it out. We'll read it. When it doesn't necessarily have to be what we're talking about at that time. It could be something we've done in the past episodes, and I'm noticing a lot of people going back to the first 3 episodes, downloading them, and I'm like, thank you guys for doing so. If you like what we did there and you have a comment on it, or you said, oh, you got that one wrong, dude, let us know. Let us know. You could easily record yourself and just send that as an attachment as well, and we could play it too, by the way. But other than that, the best way you could support us as well, as far as subscribing to Facebook and Instagram and just following us there, you could go to YouTube. We're found on YouTube as well, on both Panels to Pixels as well as Adrenaline Cinema. So all you have to do is search Adrenaline Cinema Podcast on YouTube, and then we get those messages just as well. Same thing with Panels to Pixels Podcast. It's Panels to Pixels Podcast on YouTube. And if you can, do us a huge favor, where there's a rating or a review, as there always is, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please do so. And the best thing you can do is write out your thoughts too on that. And that will help us out, as well as word of mouth. So just tell a friend. If you're into this kind of stuff and you like what we're doing, let us know. And as always, I would like to encourage everybody to go to the Pirate Core Entertainment website, which would be piratecoreentertainment.com. Still under construction, but as soon as I start learning WordPress a little bit more, I could work it out so I could get everything else that's going on there. But you could also go to the, search for Pirate Core Entertainment Podcast as a player, and then listen to the other podcasts that are out there that are getting their start, like What's On Tonight with Mandy and Becky, as they've already covered What We Do in the Shadows and are currently doing The Pit, that could be found on Max with Noah Wiley. That's on there. So they're doing that coverage now of that first initial season, doing it episodically every week. Check them out. There's always the Slay Lounge podcast, and I got it right this time, everybody. The Slay Lounge podcast with Billy and Will. Right now, they're taking a little bit of a break. They were doing Buffy the Vampire Slayer for a little bit, but they will be back with that. But in the interim, Billy has been telling me, and that's Billy with an IE, everybody. He's going to be doing his own take on Alien, even though we did cover Alien on Adrenaline Cinema podcast. He knows that, but he's got his own ideas and thoughts. So check that out when that comes out. And also follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify for Pirate Core Entertainment Podcast as well. And then try to give us some sort of, ratings or reviews.
Yeah.
But other than that, that is our show. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. I'm Mark.
And I'm Frank.
And this was Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. And we'll talk to you guys again. Bye-bye.